Today we're going to look at looking at the pure HTML behind our web page. So we're going to, just for this moment in time, work solely within the code section of Dreamweaver. Now you can do this exact same thing in Notepad or some sort of text editor, as long as it's not Microsoft Word or Pages or anything like that. Anything that just creates plain text, you can do this exactly the same in a text editor. The reason that I use Dreamweaver for this is because it gives you some helpful things in terms of coding that will help you to do things like finish tags. So for example, if I was to go to the body here and add a paragraph tag, I'll notice that you get a big list of tags come up. Now that's quite powerful because if I forget the exact nature of the tag, then I might type in, say, I know something about anchor H, and then it comes up with those things that are related to the anchor. So that's a big help. Also, if I type in a paragraph and I start typing and I press the open button here and an end, it will automatically end the right tag for me based on what the previous tag was. Now, sometimes you might have to check that, but generally that's pretty good. Now you'll notice too, it puts all of the stuff in that I need automatically. So this is the basis of a HTML document. Basically, what it's broken up into is three components. We've got the doc type, the head, and the body. And that whole thing is placed within HTML tags. So you'll notice here that I've got the doc type here, which has the word HTML in it, but has something in front of that as well. And I've also got here the open HTML here and close HTML here. So the whole thing is within HTML tags. And then I've got my head, which contains all my metadata, so all the information about my web page. So in this case, I've got the content type, which is a HTML document, and the title of my document. Now, the title of my document is what would appear up the top of a web page when I view it. So the preview at the top of Firefox or Internet Explorer that says what the name of the website is. That is not the file name. One of the biggest mistakes in web design is to leave this as untitled document. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go Mrs. B's first web page and title that. Now, all of the information in the head, none of that appears on my actual page because that's just the brains of the document, and that keeps all of the information about the document. The body is where my information is going to go. So any information that I want to put in my website goes into the body. So in this case, I'm going to start typing a paragraph, which is P. And I'm fairly bad about matching stuff up. So I always try and put in the end paragraph at the same time that I do the opening paragraph. And that way I can make sure that I always end my beginning tags, so that means that I'm a little bit more organized in terms of that. I also try to indent my tags so that I can see straight away what's happening here. So if I type in, this is okay, so here I've got my paragraph. So if I go to the design view here, I've got one paragraph. You'll notice that my title's changed up the top here, and there's nothing else aside from that, even though there's stuff in the head here. Now, in terms of this, what I should be doing is not only just looking at the design view, but I should also be previewing this in a browser. So I'm going to use Firefox because that's my preferred browser. I need to make sure I save it. Now I'm going to save this, in this case, on my desktop, but I'm going to create a folder for it. And because this is my first web page, I always call my first web page index.html. So if I go save there, and what will happen is then I'll preview that in my browser. Now that's a really important step because you will find that your browser, what it looks like in Dreamweaver, they try and match it exactly, but it's not exactly how it looks in the browser. And it's much easier to change that as you go along rather than fix it at the end. So I'm going to now preview that also in Safari so I can have a look and make sure that it's the same in Safari as well. Now in this tag, I can also put in things like headings. So if I go H1, is a top level heading, and I might go end H1 here for the end of it. Obviously, second level heading is H2 and all the way down to H6. And that's important when we start to use CSS, but basically what happens at the moment is you get your first heading is slightly bigger than your second heading, and all of those are bigger than the paragraph font. Now I can also put in emphasis on words within those tags. So I'm going to, this one I'm going to make italicized, if that's a word. And so just the first part is in italics. So what happens here is that I've got my first web page. If I go to design, you'll notice that that word there first is done. Now, if I'm really, really patient, I can view this in the split box, which is what I actually like to do. I never work just in the design view. I generally always work in split, and sometimes I just go to code. But it's really important that you learn how to code properly. So I wouldn't just go to design view and do things. I would work in the split or code view to start with. In terms of this, what that means is that I can go here and say make something bold and end bold here. Okay, and you'll notice it doesn't actually update straight away, but if I hit the refresh button here, you'll notice that that word is bold. Now if I highlight Bauer there, you'll notice that that highlights automatically, and that's actually quite helpful if I'm looking for, say, where that paragraph spans. Now, a couple more things. If I wanted to, say, do a link, it's an anchor, so an A, and my href, which equals hyperreference, equals, and then I would put my full URL in here. Oops, and also make sure I end speech marks. So everything in HTML, in web design, if it begins, it has to end. In this case, I would then have what I was actually linking from. So in this case, I've got Google, and I'm going to just do an end anchor. Now, the reason why in this case I have an end A instead of an end A href is because href here is a property of that anchor. Now, if I refresh here, what I'll find is here I've got my Google, which you'll notice links to this part here. So that's the text that I'm actually showing here. But when I click on that, that will actually go to this thing here. Now, if I also put in target, and again it comes up, equals, now if I don't worry so much about parent, self and top because we only use those with frames and that's never actually a good idea anyway. But I like the underscore blank. What that means is that if the target is underscore blank, then you'll actually go to a brand new window or a brand new tab based on the user's preferences in the browser. So if I save that, for example, and I preview it, okay, when I click on this, now my browser settings are to open all new windows in a new tab rather than a new window. So that'll actually eventually open Google. But what I've got here is that link there with the Google word. Here we go, it's opened now. My internet is clearly very slow. So basically that'll open a new tab, which is a really good idea if you are using, if you're going to anywhere outside of your website, because you want to make sure that people are on your website for as long as possible. So now images. Images are really easy, and images are IMG, clearly. Images are the one thing in HTML where you don't actually have to end it. But what we do is sort of halfway end it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the image source here. Now I'm going to use an image in the same folder as my website. So I'm going to call it image.png, right? And that would actually be the file name of what my image is. Now you'll notice that the end tag here actually occurs inside the tag. That's because the image doesn't actually wrap around anything. So in this case here, the href is actually wrapping around Google here. Same with the paragraph. The paragraph tags are wrapping around this paragraph. The bold tags are wrapping around the word spectacular. But in this case, an image actually just gets inserted. It doesn't actually wrap around anything. Now, there's a couple of other things we have to consider in terms of that image. So if we just pop in an image here, let's see what happens. If I go to Preview in Safari, I'm going to save it. Oh, and it actually adds in, that was the image that was in that folder. Now it adds it in at the perfect size. Now that might not always happen, and you may have to add a width element. And I'm just going to leave that blank at the moment, and also a height element, which is the same size as the image. So if I go to my image here on my desktop, website, okay, so here's my image, and if I just go to get info here on the Mac, you'll notice under more info, it should have the dimensions. So this is 970 by 325. So I'm going to call this 970 by 375, I think it was. I think I might be wrong. But what then happens is it means that you have, it just specifies the size really carefully. So I can actually change the size of this, say if I go 500, within the HTML. Now, the problem with doing that, obviously, is because this actually looks quite squished. Aside from that, what happens is the browser has to download the whole file before squishing it down. So it can actually increase your file sizes. So it's much better to do that in, say, Photoshop before you actually do it here. Now, this is the basis of all HTML programming. So if I'm going to now add another link, I can change that. So I'm going to take the target out, and I can change that, say, to page2.html. Okay, so what that will do is create a save, create another link there. So I've got my Google link, and then I've got my page 2 link. Now, the biggest error in HTML is when I click on this and I get one of these 404 errors, a file not found. Now basically what that means is it can't find the file in this directory. Now one of the things that people forget to do is often to create that file first. So people will come and go, oh, it's not working, and all you need to do is actually create the file. So if I save this file here as page2.html, and the other thing would be obviously making sure that it's the correct name. So making sure that that name actually reflects what the file is actually named. And there it works.